Hey, hello.
Hello.
We got everyone on here.
Yeah, except for Brian.
Just wait
But
a second.
all the board's on.
Okay, we'll just wait a second. I'm gonna for the agenda actually. Sorry.
Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
Hi, everybody. I just sent an assessor's map that we may or may not want to use, and Courtney, we may or may not want to screen share it.
Okay.
It took me a while to pull it out. It was only this morning that I realized that there wasn't any packet material.
Courtney, did you send a agenda?
No, but I emailed you all the other day saying it was pretty basic. Announcements, open session as usual, and then
Okay, all
select
right.
board work meeting.
Yeah, okay, perfect.
Wait a minute. So there was no agenda?
Helen, there was an agenda posted early last week, and I just never made it to send it to the board. I had a lot going on last week, and I apologize. It was never sent. It was posted on time, and it's just to meet, like you all discussed, with the superintendent to discuss proposed bike projects. So
Excellent. Thank you.
you're
Sorry.
welcome. That's okay. And looks like everybody's here now, Mike.
Okay. All right, it's
Okay.
November 9th, 2020 at 11:02 a.m. And I call this meeting to order of the Wellfleet Select Board. First up, we have announcements. Anything, sorry. Okay, I lost the meeting here. Okay, there you are. First up, we have announcements, public comments, anything, all comments must be kept brief. And nothing may be deliberated by the board. That's not on the agenda. Do we have any comments?
I have an announcement.
Go ahead, Helen.
Yeah, not for discussion now, but I feel that it merits a public notification of the public. The so-called Cutler bill, which affects shellfishing, has cleared its first committee hurdle and has gone on to another one. That's all I want to say. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else? No? Okay. The agenda for today is to discuss with the National Seashore potentially working together to find a concurrent or alternate route for bike trail access through Wellfleet. And we have on the meeting Brian Karlstrom, the superintendent of the National Seashore. And I guess I will sort of let anyone from the board or Brian speak first. Helen, do you want to introduce anything?
I would like to hear from Brian first, and then I have things to say, but I most of all want to hear from Brian about this. Thank you. And by the way, thank you, Mike, for forwarding us all the FLAP information, which is a method for the National Park Service to fund things for transportation, if I understand correctly. Okay, thank you.
Sure. Hi, Brian.
Yeah, good morning, Mike. Good morning, Helen, and all members of the Select Board, and Maria. I've asked Lauren to listen in as well. She's been engaged in this process a lot longer than I have, and was part of the planning team that put together the pedestrians and bikeways plan with the commission a few years ago. And I just want to say, we're willing to listen to what Wellfleet might have in mind, but I want to remind everybody of the fiscal realities that the seashore is contending with right now. We have a deferred maintenance backlog in excess of $40 million. Let that sink in for a second. That's a tremendous amount of work that needs to be done that we're continually striving to address. And we do have a network of bike trails that are in place that are used by hundreds of thousands of visitors every year. And there's an undeniable need to improve the bike routes in the area we're discussing. But the seashore would have to have overwhelmingly compelling evidence that is enormously supported by the broader public to entertain developing a new route. There's not much of a business case for us to take that on right now.
Sure.
We have a lot of concerns that are well documented in the report that's been distributed and in place that are limited not only by financial concerns, but also very significant environmental, very significant archaeological. And those are the things that we're going to be factoring in with any proposals the town of Wellfleet might put forward for us. So that's the broader spectrum of considerations we're facing with to look at anything specifically within the seashore. And I have not seen anything that's compelling enough to begin that process to this time.
Okay. Does anyone else want to speak first?
Yeah.
Helen?
And
Yes, so Brian, may I just call you Brian?
absolutely, Ellen.
Yeah, we're familiar at this point. Thank you for showing up for this. I originally wanted there to be people from the two state agencies here so that for the first time since the National Park Service worked with the Cape Cod Commission and at least the DOT, I think maybe the DCR too, in 2017 when that report was published. We all looked at what the process has been more recently, which has not been a group discussion about something that affects the whole group, the two agencies, the park, the towns, really, because everything that goes through Wellfleet goes farther north. And also from people coming from the north goes farther south. I uncharacteristically disagree with you about one thing you've said, that there is no compelling reason, there has been no compelling input
Helen,
about.
I said it has to be overwhelmingly compelling. I want to be clear on that.
I think a town meeting
Because
and
project that we were to develop, including the seashore to put forward, I can tell you right now, it's not going to compete very well nationally.
okay. And the 40 million applies to the whole National Park Service across the nation, right?
No.
Just here.
Just
Just
the
here?
seashore, and it's in excess of that. Nationwide, the
Okay.
figure is approaching 12 billion.
Okay, so now I say with humor and deference, we are being asked right now by the national, by the seashore to give input on a building that is, a kind of museum center type building for the Stellawagon Park, Stellawagon Bank Park.
Different
Which-
agency, different set of priorities.
Oh, it is
That's
different
NOAA.
budget? Different
It's
budget?
not completely separate.
Okay, thank you. I didn't realize that, but this need to get through Wellfleet safely and in a manner that's to my mind, more like what happens in Provincetown and other parts of the Cape, so that there's a bucolic, path, not on Route 6, for people wanting that kind of bike experience. This has been in the works for a long time, and it's a safety issue, and it is happening at the same time that there has been a huge upswing in bicycling. And we all know that. And I think it's not just because of the pandemic. It has to do with a number of other issues, global warming, other things, climate change. And I think about your budget all the time because we're all connected here, right? We're really all in this together. And something that concerns me is that given that state agencies and the National Park Service can both contribute financially to something, that this wasn't, starting in 2017, when the public did kick back about some of the ideas that were put forward, that the DCR and the park and the national and the DOT and the town of Wellfleet didn't sit down all together and take another look. Because what's happened is, at this point, a lot of valuable taxpayer money has been spent on a number of proposals from the DOT and the DCR, and the DCR has even bought property in Wellfleet, that if we'd all looked at it together, I really think would have happened differently. So that's in the past. Moving forward, listening to what you have to say, here's a question, Brian. Do you feel that for this not very long, really, stretch through Wellfleet, right? Given that, the DCR wants to have it all come onto Route 6, is there some alternative that could be considered financially if the park shared the financial burden with the state, with those two agencies? Has this even been an idea, and would the park be willing to talk with them about it?
We're always willing to talk, but when we start, the financial portion of it is going to be a significant challenge for the seashore right now. When we talk about the built environment and the assets that we're currently managed, the Park Service is looking to try and minimize our portfolio so that we can take care of the core missions that we already have in place.
I just, I'm going to pass it over to Ryan right now. He's had his hand up for a minute. Go ahead, Ryan.
Thanks, Mike.
Yeah. So the Outer Cape pedestrian bicycle master plan
Yes.
highlighted this particular area as an area that needed additional study before a bike path could be put in. But it really seems like we've kind of been presented something where there wasn't an additional study done.
I can't speak for the other two state agencies that aren't on the phone, but I know some significant work, as Helen alluded to, was conducted by them. I think there is potential to have further discussions from a collaborative standpoint to explore this further, but in terms of the park being able to contribute direct financial support to it, that the potential there is very minimal. However, we're willing to have discussions with them. Absolutely.
Okay.
And do further investigation as you indicated.
Would the seashore be willing to potentially work with the town and the other agencies to secure a route that might cross national seashore lines if the seashore does not have to provide funding?
The short answer to that is yes. How we get to that is a long path. We have the railroad corridor that we currently manage with state DCR that is managed by Nickerson that runs through the seashore portion of that in Wellfleet. That was already on an identified corridor. This involves a lot more there's a lot more hurdles to clear before we can get to that point with developing any kind of a new asset on seashore property.
Okay, so you do the was it the surveys that you do, like you're doing out on Bound Brook?
There's a whole administrative process to go through, and the trickiest part of it is how do we manage the facility going forward?
Okay,
We've got to be looking at something that's called total cost of facility ownership, because that's not where the biggest piece of the pie is the development and implementation of it. It's the long-term ownership and care of any facility is where the vast majority of the cost lies. That's a new shift for the Park Service that's been on the works for 20 years. You're going to start hearing it more and more as the primary driver for a lot of our decisions. Got to look at this from a business case perspective.
So
Hope that helps a little bit. Ryan,
Yeah.
thanks. Great question. Mike?
Yeah, that helps. Yeah, I was just wondering about the FLAP program, which is
Federal Lands Highway Program?
Federal Lands Access Program. So it's
Through
funded.
federal highways. Lauren, can you expand on that a little bit?
Sure. When we did the Outer Cape Bicycle Pedestrian Master Plan, we had trip funds which were specifically for land within and outside the park. And we don't have a fund source like that at this time. We have not had FLAP funds here at the seashore. I guess I'm getting a little lost because I thought we were going to talk about, what Mass DOT and Mass DCR have been planning. We did drop out of the loop, and they were discussing only with you what the plans were, and then we found out what the plans were, and we have a different take on them than the town. But if we would go back, we had looked very strongly at all of the alternatives in the seashore, including the utility corridor, and they're really, it boiled down to the three communities, Outer Cape communities, the seashore, the environmental consultants, and Cape Cod Commission not finding an alternative route that was suitable because of grades and archaeology and environmental resources. So I kind of needed to get caught up on that part of this discussion, to go back, and we spent over $250,000 on that planning process. And in fact, I think Brian has the total figure. So
Yeah, I'm aware of the resources that went in that, and I totally respect all the work that's gone into it. But it did leave this sort of area in Wellfleet that was unresolved by that master plan, there's a set of goals and objectives laid out in the master plan that don't seem to be met by that, and also the same concerns that still lie. And I understand that the sort of easiest, most cost-effective route is the route that has been chosen to go out onto Route 6. It's obviously the simplest process because the land's already owned and the right of ways there. I'm just sort of looking at, like, is there room to either allow that bike path to go through, if it were to go through that way? Is there some way that we could continue our recreational access through Wellfleet off the highway to sort of ease the amount of bicycle traffic? Because we know bicycle traffic is increasing, not decreasing, and that road is actually the actual vehicle traffic has increased on that road quite substantially since that study was done, along with the gas station that's there currently. Those curb cuts are heavily used, and I know that when I had talked to Brian with the Bike and Walkways Committee before, it became apparent that any sort of new paths in the National Seashore were a very lengthy difficult process. I guess I'm kind of wondering, with the FLAP program, is that a federal funding stream that's still available, or do you know about that program in and of itself, where the National Seashore actually doesn't receive the funds? They're done through a collaborative effort where basically the National Park Service would get around 80% of federal funding with a 20% match in funds. And I'm wondering, there's a lot of fire roads that are potentially owned by the National Seashore, and road layouts such as like Cahoon Hollow Road is a 40-foot wide layout. The actual road of pavement is only about 24 feet wide. Is there a way that we can use town roads and access through the already existing fire road system?
Mike, I might, 2 points.
Sure.
First, the FLAP program. I'm not intimately familiar with that one, but I know the Park Service has an entire office that works on community assistance for recreation programs that I know Lauren has engaged with in the past that could potentially work on this. And I want to emphasize the could aspect.
Yeah. Anything
that the Park Service is going to do is typically a 2-year process before the funds even start to materialize.
Sure.
And the FLAP program might work for that. And then secondly, with the alignment of the fire roads, conceptually, that's feasible, but there would be a lot of planning and environmental work that would need to be done to verify that before it could become any kind of a reality.
Yeah, I wouldn't expect any of this to happen overnight or even necessarily circumvent what's already going on.
I do want to point out a couple other facts about bicycle use within the seashore so that everybody understands and that it's part of the record. Bicycle accidents are the #1 safety concern in the seashore. We have more people transported to hospitals as a result of bicycle accidents than any other incident currently. It's got a lot to do with trails that were developed early in the history of bike trail development in the province lands and down at Salt Pond area. But that's a fact. It's a long-standing one. And we go out of our way in non-COVID to provide awareness about bicycle safety to the general public. We literally give away helmets to help people understand how hazardous that activity is and can be. And we do know things are on the increase. We do know there's no new technologies coming in with bikes. And another fact is that Route 6 corridor, that's a pinch point for transportation that's widely recognized, and the Wellfleet Center area of it is particularly perplexing. And I think it's worth further discussion, and the seashore may be a part of that, but I want to just manage the expectations that we're not talking a short-term solution here. It's going to take quite a bit of additional work and investment. Mike, back to you. I know hands are flying.
Yeah, go ahead. I mean, that's something that I expect going forward. I just would like, to sort of get the ball rolling and see if something can happen in the future that would sort of enrich the experience of recreating through the town of Wellfleet by bicycle, and the National Seashore, which does have a role in recreation. And I know that.
Undeniably, yep.
Yeah. And I think, in order to get there, even if it's a long process, we have to start somewhere. And basically, if there are willing parties and potential to receive funding for other things, and maybe even some municipal funding from the town of Wellfleet in the future to contribute to something. And I understand the financial constraints on the seashore, but it does seem like this FLAP program does fit the bill as far as what what is eligible and what types of activities that funding is there for. And I don't think it comes directly out of National Seashore budget. It's just about federal land access. But I'm just throwing it out there as a possible means. But I think the scoping clearly would have to be done by, the town and maybe the Cape Cod Commission, as far as like, what's possible. And then, maybe we could bring something to the seashore going forward.
I did
Mike?
have
Sure.
one more thing, and that was the next segment of the potential bike route is outside of the seashore. So I know that you're looking at the DCR route. You're wanting to have it stop at the campground, which hopefully does not have extremely adverse impacts on Duck Pond. But that next piece is outside of the seashore boundary. So all the way to Route 6 or up the utility corridor to Cahoon Hollow Road. Cahoon Hollow Road residents were not happy about a proposed secondary route, and they definitely didn't want to see the primary route on their roadway. And that's a town issue. It's a town road, and it is outside the seashore. So that's one of the reasons that area was circled, because people were struggling with each of the alternatives in that area. So
Mike?
there's a chance you could work further on that with or without us.
Helen?
Yes, so currently, and thank God it hasn't happened yet, the DCR is looking at spending money on roughly 2 miles of former railroad track, bringing a whole lot of people to Route 6. And this is what the concern is about. This is what the alarm is about. And this is a huge safety issue. Instead of that DCR money being spent to pave that and do whatever it is they do for other sections of the bike trail, what I'm hoping for is an individual, and putting it here on the table for us to take a look at, particularly with Brian and Lauren, is may we look at map 16, Courtney, please. I want to screen share for a minute. This is map 16 from the North Wellfleet Index map. From it's an assessor's map. And Lauren just said that this, if I understood correctly, Lauren, this sort of 2 miles that the DCR is thinking of using to extend the bike trail to go through Wellfleet, partially on Route 6, which is what we're all really concerned about in Wellfleet, or many of us are, not all of us, but most of us are. Could we look at this map for a minute, and starting in the lower right-hand corner, notice that there's a forest road that is not, it goes through the park, right? And it goes through much of the section that is the most dangerous on Route 6. It's parallel to it, right? And given that there might be other funds that would be available from the state or whatever, wouldn't it be a good idea to at least discuss this before one more penny of state money is spent on an extension that most of the town doesn't want, and not because they're NIMBY, but because they're aware of the safety issues. Brian, you brought up, so that we all heard it, something I was already aware of, which is how many accidents there are, bike accidents in the park on various trails. And we have our accidents with bikes also on Route 6. And although we are all divided by our budgets, we're all using these roads, and we all need to consider harm to people that are using them, whether they're visitors or people that live here all year or a good part of the year. We all need to consider their safety and having this happen well. And what I'm hoping to address and move beyond, with this conversation being the beginning of it, is that we get all the players involved in addressing that and get beyond two proposals which really don't address specific site issues on Route 6. And to remind everybody that what we asked for back in 2014, I think what the select board asked, for 2015, 2016, early days after Miles was killed in 2013, which was the straw that broke the camel's back, was to have that intersection repaired, to have decent breakdown lanes, bike share lanes on either side of Route 6 going through that intersection, just as they are for most of Route 6, so that there would be a flow through all those curb cuts, and to have the traffic lights changed, and to have there be another traffic light put so people could cross, but not to have this strange, rather disruptive, wide, in so-called improvement that goes past PJ's and through that section. It resembles, to my mind, having thought about it very carefully and having been very open-minded, the proposal about the roundabout, which was equally not site appropriate. And there are an awful lot of people besides me who are not overreacting to this, who have really thought about it and who agree. It's a dangerous place to do those things. And we need another way to get people on bikes through. And I'm going to say one last thing that might be compelling to the National Seashore. The bike trails are paved. And something that comes up repeatedly, off and on, is that if the Outer Cape population needed to get off the Cape, there is only one way to do it right now. And that is Route 6. And in an emergency, having a continuous paved route that went parallel to Route 6, only to be opened in extreme situations, might be a really good idea. Thank you.
Ryan?
Yeah, so first I have a question for Brian, and that's because you worked on the Outer Cape and pedestrian master plan. Do you know what the approximate cost is per mile of a graded and paved bike path?
That plan was done prior to my tenure, but Lauren worked on it extensively, and she can probably answer that question directly.
Okay.
I can pull it up based on our Head of the Meadow bicycle trail extension, but I'll have to get back to you.
Brian, I can tell you that that number is somewhat variable.
Yep, based on the site.
asphalt supplies, yeah, and the site, yeah.
Yeah, Head of the Meadow bike plan. The improvements were about 2 million, and it's a 2-mile trail.
Okay, and that was
That
over
was a-
pre-existing
That was that was an existing alignment. So that gives you an idea of the magnitude of cost. Thank you for that question, Ryan.
I'll get you the actuals, though. I'll send it through Courtney.
Okay. So, I don't really want the bike trail to stop at the campground. I would like it to get at least to Old County Road. I do not want the bike trail connecting to Route 6 at the location that the DCR is proposing, and that's where everybody is getting stuck on in the town. There are some people that do support it connecting there, but I mean, we've had a lot of outpouring about how it's not a good location. There was a vote, town meeting vote in 2019, which was opposing the bike trail connecting at this location. Our town meeting votes, that vote was done by voice vote, so we don't have an exact tally on the percentage. It just was a matter of it passing or not. My memories remembers it being pretty overwhelming, but that's just my memory based on where you're sitting too. It's just this one connection. If we can get it away from connecting to Route 6 at this location, would be beneficial for the town, and that's what everybody wants. Well, not what everybody, what most people want. But we have to also take some of your points. We also have to keep in mind some of the other abutters of any potential route as well. All right, that's it for me, I guess.
Thank you, Ryan.
Yep.
We have Justine or Janet. I can't see. I don't think Justine is on the call.
So, yeah, I mean, this has been my hesitation, is I knew it wasn't going to be easy. And if it was easy, it would take a long time. I kind of wanted to know, we got these maps, and I don't know who drew them or designed them. It seemed like Denny O'Connell did, but a lot of them are the back roads anyhow, like Forest Road is a dirt road, and certainly many people walk that route and bike that route with mountain bikes anyhow, and same with up in Collins Road. So I guess it seems to me and I don't know, maybe Rebecca Noble can chime in here, that there was a route all laid out, and I kind of thought we were going to talk about that. So,
So I think these are draft ideas, basically, just potential routes.
yeah. So nothing was definite.
Well, no, I mean, I think that there's still a lot of scoping and I mean, the bike and walkways doesn't really have the capability to really do anything but create draft ideas at this point, So I think they're worth looking at. I kind of am of the mindset that, there's no simple, clearly there's no simple solution, but there never really is when things are already developed, right? So like trying to put, roads or access anywhere that's developed is always going to run into issues that take a long time to resolve. And not everyone's going to be happy with every situation. That's a rare instance where, you get everyone to be happy with something that's going through a developed area. It just seems that the potential to utilize our existing layouts of town roads, which are, most of them are about 40 feet wide, and using about half of that for actual existing roadway. And then the network of already existing rights of way, or I guess I wouldn't call them rights of way, but fire roads through the National Seashore that link our town roads parallel to Route 6 north-south. That there's some potential there for us to be able to come up with a path that utilizes the natural beauty of the town, allows people safe transport through, and recreational opportunities in the park. But I don't think that I just want to speak to Laura saying that we wanted to end at the campground. I don't think that anybody's really wanted it to end there. The DCR has put things into phases. Their first phase is to go to the campground. But I think Most people that I've talked to that are concerned with the project are comfortable with it coming out to Old County, Old Kings Highway. And then that seems like the most logical way to move forward. And even if the DCR were to do something and to do what they're doing, where they're connecting to Route 6, having a concurrent route, which may take time to actually develop, where people could avoid that Route 6 corridor and still continue biking, seems like a worthwhile effort. And I hope that we can sort of look at the different aspects, and maybe think outside the box a little bit about what's possible, and maybe get to a point where we can have a north-south bike trail that doesn't sort of put all our recreational bicyclists out at that point where let's be honest, there's a lot of incentive to carry on from the terminus of the bike trail at Route 6. There's ice cream, and there's the town center, there's Cumberland Farms. Those are the types of things you do after a long bike ride down a scenic view. And the reality of entering that corridor is it's a different world than biking on a recreational trail. And I know there'll be some signs up and some sort of discouragement, but it's not the same type of incentive you have to go onto the highway coming out at LeCount Hollow Road, say, on the existing bike trail, where, the incentive there is to go right to the beach. And that's usually what people do. There's not much incentive to get out on the highway and travel down to the closest next thing is the Shell gas station. There's really no incentive to proceed onto the highway there. Coming out on a terminus right at Route 6, it seems like the incentives to carry on, and then along with the DOT sort of trying to accommodate that, there'll be plenty of incentive to carry on increasing the flow of vehicles and pedestrians through all those curb cuts. It seems obvious to me that that's the inevitable thing, is we'll see a heavy increase in pedestrian and bicycle traffic through that problematic area.
Okay, so I'm not talking about going that way. I just thought we were going to talk today, or obviously maybe another time, because we have all these different maps that were given to us with lines on them, and they're already through a number of dirt roads and fire roads. I wanted to know if you or anybody, if Rebecca has looked at these. Someone told me, I think Rebecca said she's looked at all these and they're all viable. Were you wanting to pave, like say Forest Road, pave the fire roads, pave that area, if we had the money, if we had the desire, if we had the design, the EPA permits? Like, I'm trying to get an idea between the seashore and private people and power lines, what your somebody else's idea was. Like, how would we do that going up through that area? And that's what I kind of thought we were going to talk about today.
Okay, well, if someone from Bike and, well, so I requested that, whatever maps that we could have them at the meeting. And so that's why those emails were sent. That email was sent to me, the draft maps that Denny put through a GIS system, I guess. So if somebody from Bike and Walkways on here wants to speak to the maps or what they sort of, the thought process is, but I think they're just draft potential routes that have a viable.
Yeah, I know it's viable, but it's a big viable. Lauren had her hand up.
Go ahead, Lauren. Yep.
Yeah, my question is, we don't have those maps, so we would not be able to have a discussion about that.
Sure.
But and I
I
did get some information on the FLAP program. Go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, Janet kept repeating one word in her concerns and what you just stated that I think really resonated, and that was if. There's a lot of ifs with this. We're at a how stage where we're discussing what might be feasible without having the appropriate level of background information to document what all those ifs could be.
Exactly.
We're way ahead of ourselves right now.
Yeah,
in terms of what that might look like with the seashore. We would have to go through a very definitive planning process that would include a very involved aspect of public involvement, conforming with the National Environmental Policy Act, that this sort of an action would require most likely an environmental assessment. I just want to set the expectation for everybody. And Lauren, while we've been discussing this, has been able to find out some additional information on the FLAP program, and I think would help everybody's further understanding of what that is and what the potential could be. The Park Service at a regional level has a recreation assistance program that could assist with the FLAP program. And if I can defer to Lauren a little bit further on that, I think there'll be some good information there for everybody to be aware of. And then Mike, just I want to
Sure.
point out Lance has had his hand up very patiently.
Oh,
So Lauren.
Okay, I'll just tell you what I got about the FLAP program. The Regional Alternative Transportation Program Manager, who was very involved in funding the Outer Cape Bicycle Pedestrian Master Plan and some of our existing improvements, says that they can use an agreement that they have with the Volpe Transportation Center, who did the integrated parking and transit study years ago for the park with the towns. When FLAP funds become available, there is usually a mass call for projects every 2 to 3 years. So it would come from the state of Massachusetts. If anybody has a contact at DOT to find out when FLAP might become available, she's saying 2018 was the last call, so maybe next year. And she can have Volpe assist in pulling together an application. Now that's, we're talking now about a recreational trail system versus the Outer Cape Bicycle Pedestrian Master Plan was really trying to get people to town centers and out into the environment without being recreational trails only. So we do need to really factor in people wanting to get across the highway to Wellfleet Center if we proceed.
Mike?
yes, Helen.
Wait,
Hold on.
You gotta let Lance go. Lance has had his hand up
Yeah,
forever.
I didn't see Lance's hand. Lance, if you can raise your hand next time on the Zoom, it's on if you click the participants link and hit raise hand, then I can see it up on the screen here. Otherwise, it's just whoever's face I can see. But go ahead, Lance. Thank you, Brian.
Thanks very much. I'm a new member of the Bicycle and Walkways Committee, and I spent 3 hours yesterday walking the 4.9, walking, riding, and visually inspecting the 4.9 miles that Rebecca, in participation with some really concerned citizens who also walked it. And I wanted to just tell you, just put out on the committee that the board, that things may be a lot better in shape than we thought. We have a good start on LeCount Hollow Road, and we have a good end on Collins Road in Truro, where they have already marked the bike lanes. So in between, we would follow the path up to the campground, and from there, it's you go a little bit on the power lines, and then you go to the road that the town, I understand, has a large easement on. It's Old Kings Highway, and there's very little, if any, requirement for actually, until we get to some of the nitty gritty of the butters, to actually go to the National Seashore and ask for assistance. But the assistance may be more in terms of permission granted for fire roads or for neutral use, or it's hard to imagine. And it's correct that it hasn't all, as Brian points out, that we haven't gotten all the ifs laid out. This pathway fulfills what is the primary objective of our committee, which is to consider ways to provide safe areas for biking and walking, safe areas. There is not a single area that I could see in covering the whole route that would provide unnecessary risk, either long-term health or immediate accident or death, as would be present on anything that would go on Route 6. You would have to provide for flashing lights and marked walkways and so forth. But it's all safe. There is one point where there may be a few hundred feet of, that are exceed the 5% limitation on accessibility, but that could be easily done. We calculate, my geometry is still working a little bit, by filling in about 12 feet down in a hollow at the bottom on the power line and taking off the top of it a bit. So there's nothing that, and it also, this path that Rebecca has identified minimizes the number of abutters. And from what they've said, there's a very positive sentiment in the majority towards this. So I just thank you for this time. I did want to put out that there is a really good plan that could really be workable, and it would involve Brian's money, or it might involve working together and some permissions, but I think it's a very viable plan. Thank you.
Okay, Helen?
Hi. So, the select board wanted to meet with you, Brian, and Lauren, thank you, and the Bike and Walkways Committee and the two agencies from the state. And we've had this initial conversation. And Brian, I have heard clearly every word you've said. So where I'm right now at the end of this meeting, towards the end of this meeting, I guess, is we have to figure out a way to get people safely from the state campground to a section of Route 6 at the very least that is safe for bicyclists, which means not taking them to Route 6 along what the DCR has been planning. And what I would hope for next, for as little money as possible, it could also include, in addition to what Lance just brought up, or instead of, as another option, simply widening LeCount Hollow Road from South Wellfleet to get to Ocean View Drive, which is a very beautiful, very safe way to get to Gull Pond Road. And when you get to Gull Pond Road, although that's not a great intersection because of the heavy use in the summer of that restaurant that's right there, once you get to Gull Pond Road and come onto the highway, Route 6 is much more usable for bicyclists, right? And people do that recreationally anyway. They, you know, take LeCount Hollow, they get to Ocean View, they come back on Grosse Hill Road and Gull Pond Road, and they get back on the highway. People that need to go all the way through past my house all the time. I live in North Wellfleet on Route 6, as some of you know. But Brian, what I think is important right now is that we all meet, Bike and Walkways, Select Board, National Park Service, DOT, and DCR, we all meet together and have them not spend one more money on state, not one more penny, sorry, of state money until we get to something that works for all of us. Because one of the things about this disjointed process in recent years, particularly in the last 3 years, as far as I can make out, is that money has been spent without everybody coming together about it and having all the different opinions and ideas and the brainstorming happen in a group way. And it should be a group decision. And I'm sorry that this has happened, but let's move forward and see if we can make it work all together. And I'm hoping that the select board will agree to now meeting with the DCR, the DOT, the National Park Service, and the Bike and Walkways Committee in a roundtable meeting about this. And that a video audio of this meeting will be sent to the DCR and the DOT, right? So they know what we talked about today, to get us all on the same page. And to agree with Janet and Mike, to look at this and consider all possibilities, because where we ended up in the response to the 2017 master plan was more study was needed. And it hasn't happened in a coordinated way. And the last over half a year has been completely gone kaplooey because of the pandemic. Thank you.
Ryan?
Yes, so my goal today was to find out what the seashore was willing, or what was willing to consider. I thought we needed that background before we could meet with DCR or DOT about alternative routes. You know, if certain ones were already out of, were already eliminated due to an issue that the seashore might have had with one of them, I wanted to know before they were presented to a larger group. You know, well, I think I do agree that we do need to meet with everybody, but I really think that the path forward is to provide the funding to fund the study of alternative routes. I know that Rebecca Noble has talked to the Cape Cod Commission about this, and they are, my understanding is that they are ready to go if the funding is provided for them to do that study. And then my personal goal is just to get some way for it to connect over to Long Pond Road, because Long Pond Road has a bridge over the highway that provides a very safe route into the center of town, where you don't even have to cross, you know, the highway to get, I mean, you cross the highway, but you're not, yeah, you don't actually have to cross traffic to get into the center of town. I mean, that's my goal. I do see, I have looked at the maps that Rebecca provided. You know, it is, but I think that what we really need to do is to get to a point where we can present different options to the community at large and let them decide. I think that's what we really need to do. And to get to there, we need to fund a study to, you know, both have the alternative routes assessed and identified and presented in such a way that the citizenry can have a takeaway from them. Thank you.
Hey, Lauren?
Well, I just don't, I'm not sure if I'm hearing then from you, maybe what the first thing is that you want to tackle is just that section to Long Pond Road. And therefore you might not even need to go through the seashore for that. And I did want to point to you to the bicycle plan secondary routes. They include what changes should occur to LeCount Hollow Road, to Ocean View Drive, and to many of the roads, which was mostly widening for increased shoulders. What we've done in order to implement the plan since it was created was to incrementally ask for funds for the capital improvements that we needed to do. And we're almost through the 4 projects that we needed to do to implement the plan. So we would recommend that you look again at the secondary routes, and maybe you'll find some aha moments there. Also, there was an alternatives document that was put out in, I think, March 2016 for the master plan that showed alternative routes. And you can see much more detail there. It has the width of all of them, environmental conditions, grade, etc. And that the commission also put out. I don't know if you have that, but it's a really important document. And I'd second having the commission involved.
Mike, Lauren, can you send that to us? And also, once again, to make sure that the people in the state agencies and the Cape Cod Commission are aware of what we're looking at, because this can really fall between the cracks and create confusion. Anything like that, please copy everybody with. just so they have it more recently in their files. And that document, for example, which you have brought up, should be included in the select board minutes of our public records list, which comes at the end of our minutes every time we have a meeting. So that, let's say Justina isn't here, she can go to that and she can read it, and we're all on the same page. And I wonder if, Mike, through you to the rest of the board, should there be a motion to now invite the state agencies and the Bike and Walkways Committee and the Cape Cod Commission to a follow-up meeting with, Lauren and Brian at everybody's convenience about this? Because what I'm worried about is that we haven't heard anything from, for example, the DCR or the DOT. And I have a feeling that more money is being spent even as we speak, and that somehow this conversation should happen sooner rather than later.
Helen?
Yeah, what do you think?
Well, we did get an email from the DCR saying that they were just going to implement phase 1 for now, which is to the campground. I believe you got that email too, in response
When?
to our letter to the DCR.
A while ago.
Yeah, it was about I would say a couple months ago, maybe. They responded
of
to the
course.
letter that we wrote to them.
But let's
October 1st.
October 1st. Yes, I got that and I saw it, and that's good that it's going to the campground and stopping for the moment. But let's alert them to this conversation now, because one of the things I've noticed during the pandemic is connections that may not have been as good as they should have been in the first place we've really, there's been a lot of drift away from connectiveness among people, groups working on projects. And we're slowly getting back to moving along in a more normal way. And since the communication between groups on this project has not been great in the last few years for a number of reasons, let's move forward with great connectivity, great communication, and invite them to talk about this now before any more things happen with it, so that we can start looking at funding, and if there's any of the work that has to be done with the park in terms of use of parkland, it can be put into, it can be instigated, it can be begun. And how about it? How about a meeting? I mean, how complicated is it? We have a virtual meeting, and it could be sometime in the next 2 months or something. What do you think, people? Janet, Mike, Ryan?
Well, if I can say something, Michael, after listening to everyone, and especially Lauren, and I don't know why you and I haven't talked at length about this, between the town of Wellesley, the seashore, the DCR and the DOT, and people really have to realize that the DOT and the DCR, although they're both state agencies, they're working on two different things. And what Lauren said about the Cape Cod Commission's goal and the state's goal of Smart Streets program is to bring a safe pathway, bikeway for bikers, because they are trying to reduce the number of cars, reduce traffic, reduce air pollution. So that's one thing, which is one reason why this has nothing to do with the DCR coming down and coming into Route 6, but it has to do with the Route 6 corridor being widened. So that's one thing. And that's really, to me, a very important part of all this is facilitating people who work here and have to ride bicycles to work if they're lucky enough to have bicycles. So that you want to also provide a safe way, as Lauren said with the Cape Cod Commission, for people to get into town so there's less congestion. There aren't any parking spaces. So that's one part of this. Then there's people who want a scenic route. And then hopefully that scenic route would also facilitate people going to ponds or to the ocean without driving cars. So there's really a number of different objectives. And I would say that, I don't know, I guess the Bike and Walkways Committee should just talk about all those objectives and get something together. I think people have to talk more to get on the same page. I mean, the DOT is going to do what they're going to do on Route 6. It's DCR has stopped the other phase going into Route 6, but they're not, but there's too many alternatives, too many focuses to really focus on one. So that's really what we have to do, is maybe come up with the phases of what we want to do, which we're trying to do here now.
Brian, you had your hand up?
Yeah, I wanted to follow on what Lauren suggested by looking at the secondary routes within the regional plan. Just as a return from investment, I think a lot of really high quality planning work has been done on this. And to make sure that we're ground truthing anything that we're looking at doing forward is complementary to that. We have an exceptional amount of baseline work already done, already ready to be utilized. Make sure we use it. Otherwise, the return on that investment is being minimized.
Yeah.
I challenge the commission to utilize that, and the park and the select board, because we've already invested in excess of $300,000 in that effort. It's good work. Let's use it.
Yeah, I would second that. And, I think this has been a productive conversation just to sort of see where everybody is on the subject. And I think having a meeting with the other agencies is probably a good idea at this point. And I think, if you really look at the goals set forth, just in response to what Janet was saying, by the master plan, to connect people to these areas for transportation. The DOT has to allow for safer bicycle travel, and they're doing that, but they are also accommodating the terminus of the recreational trail, which, even though the rail trail is a trail for transportation, it is also a recreational trail, as I think any bike trail that goes north to south would be used both for transportation and recreation. I didn't mean to just point it as in the direction of it only being for recreation, but I think the people who are commuting on the highway are doing it in a situation that is definitely more hazardous than will be after the DOT finishes the upgrades on the highway. But I think there's a better way, and I think that what Brian said about utilizing the work that's already been done and drawing from that is probably the prudent way to go. And I think, I'm not really sure what the next step is, but I think a meeting, as Helen suggested, probably be an appropriate step.
Inappropriate or appropriate?
Appropriate, yeah. It's always good when all the agencies are talking together at once.
Mike, may I make a motion about that? And we can look at it, just a simple motion. I
Definitely.
move to ask Courtney to contact the DOT and the DCR and to formally contact Brian, who's here, right? And the Bike and Walkways Committee, and to set up a virtual meeting where, after everybody gets to look at the same documents, this is in my motion, we all meet together and further discuss this for the first time together. And that's my motion. Is
Did it
there a
include the
second?
Cape Cod Commission in that motion? Did you?
Oh, yes, and the Cape Cod Commission, of course, sorry. Yeah, thanks.
Okay, I second that. roll call vote, I guess.
Helen, I.
Janet, I.
Michael,
Brian,
aye.
aye.
Michael, aye. Okay, motion carries 4-0. Okay, anything else before we,
Yes.
okay, go ahead, Ryan.
So, I haven't seen, the full reports on the alternatives that were done. I don't know if we can direct, town staff to procure them. I'm trying to find them on, Cape Cod Commission.
I think
website
Lauren
right
had
now.
said she would send them to the board and
Okay.
us, so yeah, thank you.
Yes.
All right, so yeah, just so that we
Do
can
so.
be as prepared as possible.
Sure.
That's it.
And
I'll send
I
them
will
today.
have Mr. Chairman, I will have a conversation with the folks from the state before the meeting so that they're just prepared for what the discussion is, to make sure that they've looked over those documents as well.
Okay. Okay, I guess, can I have a motion to adjourn?
I move that we adjourn.
Helen, second. Helen, I.
Janet, I.
Ryan, aye.
Michael, aye. Okay, I just want to thank Brian and Lauren for coming to this meeting. I really appreciate it, and I think it's a good exchange, and hopefully, I understand, things take time, but this is a good starting point. All right,
Thank you for inviting us, Mike and everyone.
Brian.
It's always a pleasure to appear before the select board, and look forward to the next time. Just keep us
Hey,
in touch.
Thanks.
Helen,
one reminder, our electronic archive for this meeting, once again, at the end of the minutes, is going to include all the stuff we might need to refer to. And for us to remember that. So if you want to find it easily, it will be in that one place, you see? Thank you.